I just wanted to open up a little dialogue on the state of honesty, state of truth.
Ashton Kutcher's lies allowed a murderer to kill again.
She was 14 when we started the show. I was like 19.
Then Danny goes and goes, dude, I'll give you $10 if you French kiss her.
I know the secrets your, quote, role model keeps for you, ones that would end you. Did you forget I was there?
She's one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18.
A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can leave someone's lips.
Hey guys, as a quick aside, I just want to let you know that I just started a podcast with one of my BFFs ever. We've known each other for 16 years, and now we have a podcast where we talk about internet drama, pop culture, and other trending topics. So if any of that interests you, head over to our YouTube channel, or you can listen pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts right now. We're called Snack Pack. Our YouTube channel is just at Snack Pack Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Snack Pack Pod. Thank you if you head over there and check it out. Now, on with this video. This video is sponsored by Factor. It's officially the holiday season. You're busy, I'm busy, we all get it. But despite that, you still want to make sure you're eating well, right? Well, I'm pleased to introduce you to Factor. It's clean eating made easy. Skip the grocery store, the meal planning, the ingredient prepping, the cooking, and the cleaning, while still getting the flavor and the nutritional quality that you need. With Factor's fresh and never frozen meals, you can have delicious quality meals ready in just 2 minutes. Factor offers keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, and vegan and veggie options, which include seafood, meat, and plant-based meals. Meals range from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can add more or reduce the number depending on your specific needs. Plus, you can easily skip a week if you need to. If you've been on this channel for a while, you know that I've worked with HelloFresh in the past. Well, Factor is actually owned by HelloFresh, and now with a wider variety of meals to choose from, there is for sure something for everyone now. I switch between the brands based on my current needs, and Factor is wonderful for on-the-go quality nutrition, which is huge for me right now. I'll be honest, I was skeptical at first. I was like, there is no way that something I just stick in a microwave for 2 minutes is gonna stand up to something that's freshly prepared, and I was pleasantly surprised. The first meal I had with Factor was their garlic mushroom chicken thighs with creamy cauliflower rice and green beans, and I swear to you, I didn't want to stop eating it. Just like every Factor meal I've tried so far, it was perfectly seasoned, the chicken was perfectly cooked, the veggies were bright. I was shocked that this came out of my microwave in just 2 minutes. And I've been watching my carbs, so I went with their keto meal kit just to help me stick with that current goal of mine. And I've really enjoyed how it's just a simple go-to lunch or dinner solution, which is great for me as not only a work from home YouTuber, but also an on-the-go mom. They also sent me these fresh juices, which, oh my god, okay. So I used to be a juicer many moons ago. The reason I quit is because I hated keeping up with cleaning my stupid juicer. There were like 87 parts that needed to be cleaned after every juicing session, and it was the worst. But with Factor, I can get fresh fruit and veggie juices without the hassle of cleaning a juicer. And when I tell you that it tastes just as fresh as if I just juiced them myself, I mean it. This one is pineapple, turmeric, basil, which is a juice I've never tried myself. It's sweet, but also like really earthy. It's a unique flavor, but it's so good. So, if you're ready to try Factor, they're offering a special deal for you, my audience. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code SavannahMarie50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Again, go to factor75.com or click the link below, use the code SavannahMarie50 and get 50% off your first Factor box. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Now let's talk about Ashton Kutcher. Ah, Ashton Kutcher, the heartthrob that we all know from that 70s show, MTV's Punk'd, and most famously, every teenage girl's 3-ring school binder in 2002.
He's so dreamy.
He doesn't need much of an introduction. We all know who this guy is, right? He rose to fame after landing a star role in 1998 as Michael Kelso in that 70s show, and since then has gone on to have an extremely successful career as an actor and venture capitalist. He has his hands in many cookie jars, and it seems like everything he's ever touched has turned to gold. But just like the mythical story of King Midas, the elated feeling of having everything you could ever want cannot last forever. Ashton Kutcher is a modern-day Midas, and is living proof that being a self-centered, greedy prick will always catch up with you, no matter how pretty, wealthy, and successful you are. No matter how much he tries to rewrite the past, the dark truth continues to follow him. Today I would like to detail the controversies we've seen spring up around Ashton Kutcher throughout his career and examine what his actions have culminated into today. Like many Hollywood superstars, Ashton Kutcher did not come from a family of actors, or old money. Born in Iowa in 1978 to a blue-collar conservative Catholic family, his upbringing was unique in the way that Ashton actually has a fraternal twin brother named Michael who had cerebral palsy and heart complications, so his home life was stressful as a kid. He says he kept himself busy so he could spend as much time away from home as he could. He was troubled and ended up spending 3 years on probation for attempting to burglarize his high school, but things turned around for him while studying biochemical engineering at the University of Iowa when he was approached by a modeling scout and was essentially thrust into the spotlight. Truly a real-life example of pretty privilege. He didn't stay in the modeling industry for long though, despite finding significant success doing it, because in 1998 he landed his breakout acting role as Kelso in That 70s Show, where our first controversy begins. Getting cast for That 70s Show was what catapulted Ashton's acting career. Not only Ashton though, it catapulted the careers of all of its younger cast members. Most notably for this video, his castmates Mila Kunis and Danny Masterson. What we all most likely know today is that Ashton and Mila are now married in real life. They were wed in 2015 and they have 2 children together. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Almost like high school sweethearts, except instead of meeting at school, they met on the set of a TV sitcom where their characters were dating, only to wind up falling in love in real life and having a beautiful, happy life together, right? Well, not quite. When casting for That 70s Show took place, Ashton was 19 going on 20 and Danny Masterson was 22. When Mila was cast to play Jackie, she actually lied about her age.
Now you're about 14 years old, right? When you got That 70s Show?
I was in 9th grade.
You were in 9th grade. They were looking for someone who was at least 18. Did you lied and told them, or you just kind of didn't tell them the truth?
I fibbed a little. The character's supposed to be 14, but in all television they want you to be legally emancipated so you can work longer hours. And so I must have at one point said something to the extent of, yeah, they were like, are you 18? I must have been like, yeah, sure. I was clear, if you watch the pilot, I am clearly a child.
By the time this had been known to producers, she had already been cast for the role, and they decided to keep her because they still thought that she was best suited for the role. And despite Mila Kunis being a minor, like not 17 going on 18, like she was 14. Despite that, she was still written as the girl who got around the friend group, if you know what I mean. Today, in the year of our Lord 2023, this kind of casting decision would not fly. But it's important to remember that times really have changed. That 70s Show is a 25-year-old show by now, if you can believe it. A quarter of a freaking century ago, Hollywood got away with this stuff all the time. That doesn't make it okay, of course, but no one spoke up about it because it was kind of the norm. In the same way that, for example, Shane Dawson used to be one of YouTube's biggest stars beginning in 2008, and for many years after that, only to find himself being canceled in 2020 for the videos he made back then that featured blackface and inappropriate treatment of minors and just generally gross and offensive quote-unquote comedy. It was unfortunately normal in 2008, and it was much more widely accepted back then. It really isn't that way now, and people are just now starting to be held accountable. In the context of Ashton Kutcher and Danny Masterson's work relationship with with 14-year-old Mila Kunis, we're seeing this accountability happen today since it hadn't been addressed back when it happened. And current events are making these issues relevant. In the early days of the show, plenty of television appearances began popping up featuring the cast of that 70s show. These clips have become unearthed recently as there's been a very public and serious situation going on with Danny Masterson, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. But Mila and Ashton had their first on-screen kiss in the 5th episode of the series, filmed in 1998, meaning that Mila Kunis was 14 and Ashton Kutcher was 20. If it hadn't gone any further than this, you could make the argument that they were young and they were working and this is what the job required them to do. However, let's observe this interview from 2002 featuring Ashton and Mila being interviewed by Rosie O'Donnell.
She was 14 when we started the show. I was like 19, right?
Right.
And they're like, okay, you guys are going to be making out in this scene. And I'm like thinking like, wait, this is like slightly illegal,
I was gonna say, that's
right?
probably your first kiss ever, right?
He was my first kiss. Why someone bet you made with Danny about our first kiss?
No, it wasn't the first kiss.
No,
This was like
go
a
ahead,
second or
Ashton.
third kiss.
It was like the first week.
No, it was not the first week.
Whatever, let me tell you what happened.
No, let me tell you what happened.
No.
You can tell that even back then, Ashton is clearly trying to downplay what Mila was about to tell us. Ashton clearly knew it wasn't okay, especially given the fact that Mila admits that this is her first kiss ever, which makes sense because she was 14 freaking years old.
Okay, so I've never kissed a guy, so I was so, I mean, you know, Ashton's attractive, and I was a 14-year-old little girl, and I was extremely scared for my life.
Sure.
And he was very nice about it. He was like, oh, don't worry. So I was like, okay. Then Danny goes and goes, dude, I'll give you $10 if you French kiss her. What would you stick your tongue in my mouth or some?
What? No.
For $10.
You're making it sound like it was like really. Okay, Dan, we had a little side bet going.
Yeah.
Like,
Which was?
It wasn't very
as to whether or not, you're kissing on the show or boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah.
You would use tongue, right, Rosie? I mean, you would.
It depends what kind of an actor you are, I guess.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So Danny bets me like $20 that I wouldn't do it, and of course I'm like, yeah, sure, what's the deal? You know?
Then the cop showed up and you got arrested, pretty much.
Props to Rosie for trying to remind us that this is definitely not okay. Even though she's presenting it as a joke, like, ooh, you're kissing a minor, you should go to jail, call the police, she's still like, hey, I know this is a fun little talk show and what we're trying to do here is like keep the spirits up, but like that's inappropriate, dude.
They should have,
He
but they
never
didn't.
did it, and
I so did it.
He
I so
claims to
did
this
it.
day he did that. I swear.
Mila,
never,
I so did it.
He never did it?
I didn't let him. I think he tried, but I think I kept my mouth so closed.
Come on.
Yeah. You did the old teeth block?
Yes.
Yeah,
You didn't let him do the teeth block. You were like,
He never got his
You were
tongue
very
out.
excited.
You didn't, Ashton. Just admit it.
Dad, I swear.
She's 14. She didn't. You stop it.
She would know that was not the first. You had turned 15 by then.
No, she was 12, but I know it.
There's a big difference. That 1 year makes the whole world change.
All right, then.
These disgusting comments by Ashton trying to justify taking this on-screen kiss to a personal level to win a $10 or $20 bet that Danny Masterson put him up to. I mean, come on, this is TCAP territory. This is when Chris Hansen asked the men who show up, like, how old was this girl? And they're like, oh, she was 14. And Chris Hansen's like, well, she told you she was 12, but that doesn't make it any better. 14 is bad. 15 is bad. You're 20, dude. You shouldn't be tonguing down anyone of any of those ages. This video also recently surfaced where Mila is sitting on Ashton's lap, and Ashton says he's doing the interview because he was told that if he did it, Mila would sit on his lap, and he likes it, and it feels good. Ashton was 20 at the time, and Mila was 14.
Josh told me Mila would sit on my lap if I it feels good.
This situation really was a fail to Mila all around, from the casting directors agreeing to still keep her on the show despite her age, while also at the same time still continuing to write her into romantic situations is just so not okay. And if anyone who worked on the show had any moral compass at all, someone would have spoken up about forcing a 14-year-old girl to kiss adult men over and over and over again. Maybe nobody did out of fear of insubordination, who knows? You could argue that this kind of irresponsibility is what created this weird social standard between the actors on set. But 20 years old is old enough to be like, ew, Danny, no, that's not okay. But instead, we had other television appearances of Ashton making inappropriate comments towards Mila, like in this clip from 2000, where the approximate ages of Mila and Ashton would have been 16 and 22 respectively.
Not only do I get to work with our beautiful, sexy, hot next guest on that 70s show, but I'm lucky enough to play her boyfriend, so I get to make out with her. Okay, a very talented, hot, smart, and beautiful Mila Kunis.
Imagine if a 22-year-old man went on TV today and said this about a 16-year-old. With this being a video specifically about Ashton, I'm not going to touch on the controversies from Danny Masterson and Wilmer Valderrama on set during that time, but wow, that's a whole other rabbit hole. And I can't even imagine how uncomfortable Mila must have been, just working on set with these pigs all the time. Mila Kunis was not the only minor who was subject to inappropriate comments made by Ashton during this time, though. In this clip from Punk'd, which is an old MTV show where Ashton would play pranks on other celebrities, he had this to say about Hilary Duff and the Olsen twins, who were 15 and 16 at the time, respectively.
Hilary Duff. I huff and I puff and I blow the Duff down! Hilary Duff is in Liz McGuire. She also has an album out. She's going to be in a movie called Cheaper by the Dozen. And she's one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18, along with the Olsen twins.
Listen, I understand that Ashton Kutcher is somewhat of a comedian. Most of his jokes have always been edgy. Some people may write off these comments as just jokes not meant to be taken seriously, but when paired with what we know from Mila in the Rosie O'Donnell interview, that she put up a teeth block so that Ashton couldn't put his tongue in her mouth, how he was willing to go through with this bet, how frequently her character was written to be kissing him, and basically everyone else on the show, I mean, it goes a little farther than words at that point, doesn't it? Seems more like an extremely concerning pattern of behavior. This following section talks about a famous murder case and trial, and while we won't go into much detail, I will probably describe some things here that might make some viewers feel uneasy. The murders involve 2 innocent but grown women. There was also a 3rd victim back in the 90s that I don't add here because it's kind of irrelevant to like this story here. The same guy also attempted to murder a 4th person, so this is a serial killer we're talking about here. So it's heavy subject matter, just use proper discretion while watching this part of the video. While Ashton was at the height of his newfound fame, he found himself in another controversy that would eventually lead to a murder that probably could have been avoided. Yeah, I didn't know this until recently, but Ashton Kutcher has been a key witness at a murder trial, and his lies may have cost someone else their life. His lies may very well have allowed a murderer to walk free long enough to kill again. On February 21st, 2001, Ashton went to the home of a 22-year-old fashion design student to pick her up for a date. He had met her at the same house during a party a week earlier. According to Ashton's testimony, he had knocked on the door and no one answered. He was late getting to the house, so he assumed that she had already left and she was upset with him. Interestingly enough, he says he looked through the window and saw red wine stains on the floor, but he thought nothing of it and left. He also claims that the following day, after he found out what happened, he called detectives because he was freaking out that his fingerprints would be on the door and that he might be considered a suspect. What we do know is that the girl's roommate found her lifeless body outside of her bathroom, and she had been stabbed 47 times. It was obviously a ruthless and vicious crime, and at the time, prosecutors suggested that whoever had killed her was someone who was jealous of her budding relationship with Ashton. For years, the case went unsolved. It's what happened only a few years later that really brought Ashton's retelling of events into question. In 2005, a mother of 4 was murdered in her home in another vicious and brutal attack. Again, this murder, as brutal and vicious as it was, went unsolved until 2008 when, and I'm not gonna say his name because I don't believe in giving murderers more attention, because a lot of the times with these people, they like want the infamy that comes with being a serial killer, but the same guy was finally caught while attempting his 4th murder. This woman managed to fight off her attacker, which forced him to flee the scene. However, he left a trail of blood that led to his location. Later on, the previously mentioned murders were linked to this guy and he was sentenced to be executed, despite the fact that no one has been executed in the state of California since 2006, so it's likely this guy will just rot away for the rest of his life in prison. But whatever, okay. So where does Ashton Kutcher fit into all of this? Well, first of all, no one is accusing Ashton of being guilty of murder, or even having anything to do with the murder of this girl that he was supposed to take on a date. Instead, the allegations against him suggest that he knew more than he initially told detectives, and he kept the knowledge of the murder to himself for the sake of his career, and that if he had called the police the moment he knew of her murder, the killer could have been caught and prosecuted then, instead of going on to kill again and then attempting to kill again. So here's what's up with that. This is jumping ahead a bit, but there's this woman named Chrissy Bixler. She is one of the 3 women who came forward with a lawsuit against her ex-boyfriend and that 70s show star Danny Masterson. The lawsuit alleged that he had raped her and the other women in the early 2000s. Danny was convicted of raping the other 2 women, but Chrissy's allegations did not result in a verdict. Since then, she has not stayed silent. Again, there's more to talk about regarding this case, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but all you need to know that since the trial, Chrissy has spoken up with allegations against Ashton Kutcher. Chrissy Bixler went to her Instagram stories and posted this slide, which called a lot of Ashton's testimony into question, and began to shift the public perception of him. She writes, "Dear Ashton, I know the secrets your role model keeps for you, ones that would end you. Did you forget I was there? You were on speakerphone that night you called Danny on February 21st, 2001. I heard everything. I heard the plan. In my opinion, you're just as sick as your mentor." She also addresses Mila Kunis in this slide, and while most of what she says isn't relevant to the context of this video, she did say this near the end. "You all must forget that I was there the whole time those first 5 years of that 70s show. I remember everything." In other Instagram comments, she says, "Yes, he was in his car for over an hour outside of Ashley's house speaking with his manager about what to do to protect Ashton's career and reputation. He then called Danny. I heard the entire conversation. Law enforcement was/is aware that what I'm saying is true." These statements from Chrissy were actually confirmed to Aaron Smith Levin from the YouTube channel Growing Up in Scientology, which is an amazing YouTube channel. I absolutely recommend checking it out. I'll link it down below. But he had all of this confirmed to him by the LAPD.
And some of the information is devastating and was shared with me from other former Scientologists who are close with Ashton, not Danny, and I shit you not, shared with me from more than one detective at the LAPD who was working on the case. The LAPD themselves determined that Ashton was lying about what he saw, didn't see, didn't do at the crime scene, about not having entered the house, about I looked in through the window and I saw some red on the carpet, but I thought it was spilled wine. The LAPD, through their own investigation, already determined you couldn't possibly have seen anything Ashton Kutcher had claimed to see from the window. They knew he was lying about having entered the house, meaning Ashton claimed he never entered the house. He claimed the door was locked. He claimed he tried to open the door and it was locked, and that's why he never went in. And then he looked in the window and he saw some stuff. The LAPD was like, this guy is lying his ass off.
What is fascinating to me, and I think the rest of us, is how Ashton thought that this was gonna be some scandalous career-ending situation. I mean, it's not like anyone assumed or would have thought that he was guilty of this murder. No one thinks or thought that he ever had anything to do with it. The problem is, due to Ashton's own selfishness, his inability to act, having been the first person to discover a warm, dead body, and his subsequent lies to the LAPD, seriously impeded on the LAPD's ability to prosecute this guy, the real killer. He let him run free. And a few years later, this killer murdered a mother of 4 children. As far as I'm concerned, even though Ashton wasn't physically involved in these murders, he still has that mother's blood on his hands. And I hope it was worth it, Ashton. I'm not sure how you could even sleep at night knowing that you sold out the mother of 4 children for the sake of maintaining your high status in Hollywood. It's absolutely sickening.
It's not that the LAPD never caught the guy. It's that they couldn't prosecute him. Because Ashton's lies created reasonable doubt. The defense would have made mincemeat out of the prosecution because here you had Ashton Kutcher, determined by the investigators to have been lying about his presence at the crime scene. How can you possibly successfully prosecute someone when you have someone who was literally at the crime scene, whose fingerprints are at the crime scene? We're talking about Ashton Kutcher, whose DNA is at the crime scene, who lied about being there. Nobody thinks Ashton Kutcher was guilty of that crime, but it's why they couldn't prosecute. And this guy, this killer turned out to be a serial killer.
In 2003, Ashton would begin dating and then would eventually marry established and respected actress Demi Moore. The marriage would last for 6 years, and they would ultimately split in 2011 due to infidelity. And Demi is not the one to blame here. The details on these incidents were brought to light in 2019 when Demi released her best-selling memoir called Inside Out, where she recalled her experience being married to Ashton. At the time they became a couple, the big topic of conversation was the age gap between Ashton and Demi. He was 25, she was 40. Despite the 15-year age gap, Demi says she didn't see him as some flaky kid, but instead as a young man who had already established a very mature approach to life. There was just an ease between us, a deep comfort, and a lot of electricity, she said. Demi says that Ashton was one of the first people she really talked to about being raped at the age of 15. She says Ashton was empathetic to this, which allowed her to start dealing with that trauma, that shame, and to start healing. They also had attempted to start a family together, but had suffered a tragic loss of the pregnancy at 6 months gestation, and the subsequent IVF treatments they tried did not work. According to reports, though, these experiences only helped them grow stronger together at the time. Afterwards, however, Ashton would start pressuring Demi into bringing a third person into their bedroom, an idea that Demi was uncomfortable with, but she went along with it to show that she was a cool wife, in her words. "I wanted to show him how great and fun I could be," she said. "I went into contortions to try to fit the mold of the woman he wanted his wife to be." Because of these experiences, she says the lines and boundaries of their relationship began to blur. In 2009, Demi tweeted that the couple would be starting a non-profit together to fight sex trafficking, and they were inspired to do so after watching a documentary about child sex trafficking in Cambodia. The official reveal of this project, which would come to be known as Thorn, took place in 2010 at a Clinton Global Initiative event. And just to skip forward a tiny bit real quick, Thorn seems to be doing a lot of great work from what I can see. It definitely was started with good intentions, and it still runs today while making a positive impact for the fight against child sex trafficking. We'll talk more about Thorn in a little bit, but anyway, back to the Thorn launch. When you see footage from this speech, you might expect Demi to appear more passionate, more excited about launching this initiative, but instead she looks kind of down and out of it. While one might argue that the subject matter that this nonprofit was combating is not the happiest of things to be talking about, there's likely another reason for Demi's more solemn demeanor. Allegedly, Ashton had slept with a 21-year-old woman in their own home while Demi was out of town.
You got a Google alert?
Yes.
She called him. What did you say to him?
I asked if it was true. He admitted it right away. And I think my response was, "Are you kidding me?" And I think I felt like I could barely take a breath.
But she has to walk the red carpet, and here she is at that moment, 1,000 light bulbs flashing.
despite the turmoil that this had obviously caused between the two of them behind closed doors, they decided to go through with the speaking engagement anyway. In her memoir, Demi recalls the moment as speaking to a room full of important people while standing next to her husband, who just cheated on me with a girl about the age of my oldest daughter.
Real men protect, respect, love, and care for girls.
Ironically, as she made these statements on stage, she says in the book that she truly did not feel protected, respected, loved, or cared for myself. In 2011, Ashton had cheated on Demi again, on his 6-year wedding anniversary with Demi. Ashton allegedly told the girl that he and Demi had been separated, and they'd spent the night together, where Ashton allegedly made a bold move by just walking up to her and kissing her like the cocky jerk-off that he clearly is. There are a lot more details on this encounter. That young girl spoke to Us Magazine about her night with Ashton, and it's just kind of slimy and gross, all things considered. We're not gonna do a retelling of marriage-ending acts, plural, here. We don't need to describe the infidelity that happened. I don't think any of us blame the girl. I think Ashton is very clearly the one in the wrong here. He's the one that's gross in this situation, since he's a married man who's already been caught cheating once. And that's not even the end of his gross mistreatment of Demi Moore. Ashton also had allegedly encouraged Demi to break her 20 years of sobriety, which would turn into a deep, twisted hole that she would later struggle to get out of again. She writes, Ashton was enjoying a glass of good red wine when he said, "I don't know if alcoholism is a real thing. I think it's all about moderation." I wanted to be that girl, the girl who could have a glass of wine at dinner or do a tequila shot at a party. In my mind, Ashton wanted that too. Ashton clearly had an influence over her, and I don't know if the age gap played a role in it, but it sounds to me like, personally, in my opinion, that it definitely could have. You have a woman in her 40s with grown children who are almost the same age as her new husband. There is a social divide between people in their mid-20s and people in their 40s, and it sounds like Demi was trying to hang on to her youth so Ashton wouldn't get bored of her. Or maybe that's just what was going on in her head anyway, but I think it's a justifiable concern to have given the age gap.
I just felt like a 15-year-old girl hoping somebody liked me.
We've been conditioned societally to look at the value of a woman being tied to her fertility. Like, what would an older woman have to offer?
In her memoir, Demi recounts her 45th birthday party in Puerto Vallarta, where she took a bunch of tequila shots and then passed out in a hot tub. Ashton had to carry her back to her bed, and she says that he was furious with her for taking things too far. She says his reactions to moments like this were always confusing because she felt pressured to party hard, but if she accidentally went a little too hard, suddenly she was being shamed by the man encouraging her to behave that way in the first place. Unfortunately, as their relationship dissolved, so did Demi's own self-worth. She tried to cope with the pain by turning to substance abuse once again, despite being sober for 20 years before her relationship with Ashton.
And then enter Vicodin. 12 pills a day?
Yeah, it definitely got up there.
She was previously married to Bruce Willis, and they had 3 kids together. She had experienced a lot in those 20 years of sobriety, only for a 20-something-year-old Hollywood heartthrob to show up and cause so much destruction. Demi says she lost a ton of weight, and her 3 daughters stopped speaking to her, only to be rushed to the hospital after passing out at a party.
Is she breathing normally?
No, not so normal, but more sort of shaking.
Everyone else was witnessing my body flailing. My daughter terrified that she was going to see me die right in front of her.
When Demi released her memoir, Ashton's reaction was pretty gross, in my opinion. He told news outlets that he was fucking pissed, and he also published a tweet that said, "I was about to push the button on a really snarky tweet. Then I saw my son, daughter, and wife, and I deleted it. Heart." Which, dude, come on, we see right through that, right? This is a snarky tweet. I'd hate to see how disgusting the tweet that he was going to post was. And it's all speculation that this tweet was even about Demi in the first place, but the timing adds up. To add his kids and his wife to that tweet serves to kind of rub it in the face of Demi Moore, just to kind of be like, hey, loser ex-wife, I have a new younger wife now, and we successfully made babies. But don't worry, I won't respond to your silly memoir. I think that tweet says all that we need to know, Ashton. You're a pompous asshole, we get it. In 2012, Ashton became the new spokesperson for Pop Chips, which is a brand of potato chips. And in that partnership, Ashton became the brown face of racism with this less than complimentary advertisement. In this ad, Ashton plays multiple characters in a kind of mock dating show. While the tone of the commercial was supposed to be funny, poking fun at certain stereotypes, one stereotype depicted in the ad sent viewers into outrage. I bet you'll never guess which one it was.
I'm Raj. I'm a Bollywood producer. I'm looking for the most delicious thing on the planet.
Okay, yeah, it was this one. Having darkened his skin and put on a terribly stereotypical Indian accent, this ad screams racism. And also, the only part where Pop Chips appear is when this dog licks a chip. It left audiences enraged and confused because what does any of this have to do with potato chips? There's no punchline here, it's just Ashton Kutcher being racist. Unsurprisingly, it was pulled from Pop Chip's social media. And if you didn't know, Ashton Kutcher is a venture capitalist, which basically means he's a rich dude who invests in startup businesses in exchange for a portion of their profits, a la Shark Tank. He actually appeared on an episode of Shark Tank at one point. So Ashton was actually Pop Chip's president of pop culture, apparently, and he's the one who developed this ad campaign in the first place, which cost the company $1.5 million.
You coming up here, Pip? Good girl.
In 2012, darkening your skin tone for laughs was widely unacceptable. The way Ashton has seen himself as this untouchable, rich, hot, sexy Hollywood elite guy is pretty obvious with business ventures like this. Sorry, but racial stereotypes, especially when they're portrayed by rich white men, are not funny. They've never been funny. They definitely weren't funny in 2012, and they're not funny today either. You can still see his white privilege through his brown face paint. How can anyone think this is okay or appropriate? Apparently, the ad campaign continued with the other characters that Ashton was playing. They just pulled Raj out. I can't. This is a goofy little side tangent, but I think it helps build the case against Ashton as being an absolute jerkface. Ashton Kutcher has beef with a few celebrities. They're mostly petty little spats, but I think some of them hold some weight. In 2016, comedian Kathy Griffin wrote a book called Kathy Griffin's Celebrity Run-Ins, where she mentions her interactions with Ashton. Quite frankly, if you have interactions with Kathy Griffin and you end up being the one that comes out looking like a dick, then you've got some serious problems, my guy. She writes, "We co-hosted a charity event in 2005 for ubid.com. Kutcher, my co-host, did not speak to me once. It was bizarre and rude and made me feel as if he thought I was beneath him. 3 years later, I'm grabbing something to eat, and who should walk in but Kutcher and Demi Moore? I smiled and waved. Nothing. If you won't say hi to me in the Mexican takeout joint, you're a D-bag." And while I couldn't find the original source material that this allegation comes from, it might have been the book, I'm not sure, but Nikki Swift reports that there was a time where Kathy was talking to P. Diddy, and then Ashton, cut in front of Kathy like she wasn't even there and started talking to him. Completely interrupted the conversation like a douchebag. In my opinion, 3 weird interactions with the same person that all result the same way is a pattern of behavior. It can't just be written off like, oh, he was just having a bad day. No, I'm pretty sure he is, as Kathy Griffin put it, a D-bag. Here, with an honorable mention, we have Melissa Joan Hart, who claims that she attempted to kick him out of 2 parties that she had been hosting back in her quote-unquote party days for making smart-ass remarks to her when she asked him not to smoke in her house. She couldn't get him to leave because he was a tall, muscular dude, and she definitely was not that, so she had to just give up. I feel like that's really shitty, toxic masculinity and male privilege at its finest. But most notably, Ashton has seemingly pissed off Sharon Osbourne to the point where
where she's talked about it in multiple interviews and on multiple platforms. Ashton appeared on The Talk, an Emmy Award-winning American daytime talk show that's extremely well known, airing every day on CBS. They just always have celebrity guests on, and they talk about pop culture and current events, basically. And one of the most well-known and long-serving hosts on The Talk was Sharon Osbourne, who was on the panel for 11 years, ending her run with the show in 2021 after an on-screen spat where she defended Piers Morgan, which is its whole own other thing, but regardless. I mean, come on, we all know who Sharon Osbourne is. She's a household name. She's done like everything. It's impossible to list her roster at this point. It's just gigantic. So in September 2023, Sharon went on E! News, and when asked if she's ever had a negative encounter with any celebrities, her answer was none other than Ashton Kutcher.
Oh, name the rudest celebrity you've ever met.
Oh, this is perfect for you, Sharon.
The guy that's married to an actress, and he used to do that 70s show.
Ashton Kutcher?
Yes.
Really?
Ashton Kutcher. Oh, rude little boy.
Okay, let's see. What's Nelly? I was not prepared for that.
I was not prepared for that either.
Rude.
Okay.
Rude.
Really? Yes. Dastardly little thing.
This led to a clip resurfacing from her interview with Larry King in 2018, where she goes into a bit more detail.
I didn't get on with one guy, that Ashton Kutcher.
Oh, the tech guy.
Yeah, actor-ish. Didn't get on with him at all.
Highest paid actor, I think, on television.
Oh. Lordy Lord.
What did you like about Ashton?
Bad attitude for me, because I got his name wrong. So he was pissed, and he comes on with an attitude, and he goes, and what have you done in this industry? And I was like, kid, don't start with me, because I'm going to eat you up and you out.
What makes it so clear that this experience really stuck with her is that she opens up again in an interview with none other than her BFF Piers Morgan.
He came on a show I was on, The Talk, and I had to introduce him, so I introduced him, and you know me, I'm terrible with names, and I didn't pronounce his name properly. So in the break, I apologized for not getting his name correct. And he turned around and he said to me, now, let's go back here, because he'd known me for many years. I'd worked on his shows, the whole family had, when we were all at MTV at the same time. Yeah. And he looked at me and he goes, who are you? What even do you do? Wow. What's your thing? And so I looked at him and I just said, you know, you little shit. And so after that, it just stayed with me. And, you know, as I said, he's a dastardly little man.
I wish we had video evidence of this conversation, because given that Ashton is somewhat of a comedian, the argument could be made that he was just poking fun at Sharon and it went over her head. Did he laugh after he said it? Was he aggressive? Was he smiling? Or was he rolling his eyes and scoffing? It's all he said, she said, and if there's no video evidence, then we'll never be able to say for sure. On the other hand, if you're an A-list celebrity who's famous for being an actor first, you should be good at portraying whatever message it is you're trying to portray. Like, that's what you do when you're acting. If you're a good actor, you're able to do this without fault. So either Ashton Kutcher is a terrible actor, which I guess is possible, or he wasn't trying to poke fun at Sharon, he was just being a dick. And clearly it bothered Sharon so much that it stuck with her for years after it originally happened, and she's talked about it on multiple interviews.
It was funny though, because Mum made that comment, and then the next day it came out that he'd written the letters to the judge, and I think everyone thought it was because Mum knew that, but you've done that interview like weeks prior.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah, it just coincided at the same time, yeah.
And I think the reason that these clips picked up so much steam is, as we just heard in the last clip, Sharon made that comment on E! News the day before the current controversy surrounding Ashton kicked into high gear. If you're asking why everything I've shared so far is relevant today, it's because of the current ongoings with Ashton Kutcher's aforementioned That 70s Show co-star and friend Danny Masterson. Since this is a video about Ashton and not Danny, I'm not going to go into major details about the whole thing. I'm just going to go through a brief overview. But it is a wild ride in and of itself. That entire situation would be its own long video separately from this. But if you want the latest updates on the situation as well as detailed rundowns of what's gone on so far, I highly recommend checking out the Growing Up in Scientology YouTube channel. The host, AA Ron, is great, and I think he has a really unique and important perspective, having, well, grown up in Scientology. Anyway, the situation that we're talking about here involves rape and assault, which we won't go into the details of, but those parts are still a prominent theme while we're talking about all this. So as always, please use proper discretion. Extremely long story short, Danny Masterson was involved in a scandal that was brought up in March 2017 when 3 women filed a lawsuit against him, all former members of the Church of Scientology, which Danny Masterson was also a part of. In the lawsuit, the women had alleged that he had raped them in the early 2000s during the time That 70s Show was taping. This then prompted a criminal investigation by the LAPD. After those initial 3 allegations were made, a 4th person made similar allegations against Danny, which resulted in Netflix firing him from his starring role in their original series The Ranch, which, not so coincidentally, was being produced by Ashton Kutcher, and Ashton also starred in it alongside Danny. After a 5th allegation came forward, Danny was then dropped by his talent agency. After the the Church of Scientology, got involved, another civil suit was filed against not only Danny Masterson, but also the Church of Scientology. This suit was to receive damages for the harassment the 4 accusers of this suit received after being assaulted by Danny Masterson, but being told they're not allowed to go to authorities about it by the church. Scientology literally has an expressly written doctrine prohibiting the reporting of illegal activities to outside authorities. The accusers eventually did so anyway, and that's when the Church of Scientology declared these women as suppressive people, which that basically means that if you're a member of Scientology, you have to cut off every single person who's been labeled as a suppressive person, or else they'll label you as a suppressive person. It doesn't matter if they're your friends, family, children, doesn't matter. There's no exceptions. And then, when you're suppressive people, you're subject to what's called fair gaming in Scientology. Fair gaming is when Scientology sees you as an enemy of the church, and they will harass you, they will stalk you, and they will purposely inflict emotional distress on your life. And they will keep this up until you submit yourself into silence in regards to Scientology. When Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard, wrote the fair gaming policy, he literally wrote that anyone judged to be a threat to the church can, and I quote, be punished and harassed using any and all means possible. And they do this. They have always done this. Like, they will hire private investigators to stalk people. They've allegedly killed people's dogs out of retaliation for them speaking out against Scientology. Like, I recognize the risks that I'm taking even saying their name, but the power that they hold over people is so terribly abusive. Anyway, Danny Masterson was charged with rape in 2020, with the first trial resulting in a hung jury in November of 2022, and then the retrial resulted in Danny being convicted of 2 of the 3 rape charges in May 2023. He was sentenced to an indefinite period of 30 years to life in prison. His attorneys say that they'll attempt to appeal the conviction, but for now, Danny Masterson is being held behind bars without the possibility of parole for, I've seen reported, 25 and a half years, but also I guess there's a possibility that he'll be able to receive parole after 20 years because he'll reach a certain age. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo going on here, but let's just say he'll be an old man before he even gets the opportunity to get out on parole, and his young daughter will be in her 30s. So what does any of this have to do with Ashton Kutcher? Well, I'm sure you've at the very least heard of the letters of support that Ashton and Mila sent to the judge in support of Danny Masterson and his character. And while it actually is very common practice to collect character character support letters in criminal trials, the controversy lies in the way that Ashton and Mila judged Danny's character in the first place. Masterson's defense team actually got 50 people to write letters. Mila and Ashton were just 2 out of those 50. These letters ultimately had no effect on the judge's harsh ruling. The people that this really did affect, though, however, were Ashton and Mila. Ashton's friendship with Danny Masterson started all the way back when they were both cast on that 70s show in 1998, and it persisted throughout the following years, accompanying each other to movie premieres, parties, and Hollywood socialite types of events. The two of them, alongside Wilmer Valderrama, also invested in an upscale Italian restaurant together. Ashton was the executive producer of the Netflix show called The Ranch, which Danny and Ashton co-starred in. Co-stars, friends, business partners, and Scientologists? The reason for that questionable last bit is because this picture recently resurfaced showing Ashton, Mila, Danny, and 2 of their other That 70s Show co-stars at a Scientology event together that they allegedly attended 2 years in a row.
To go to a religious holiday event and go 2 years in a row, to me, this is just my personal opinion, signals that you have some sort of interest in the religion. I don't know that I would go to an LDS event 2 years in a row if I wasn't either interested in the religion or a practicing LDS member myself. I don't know that I would go to Catholic Mass 2 years in a row on Christmas Eve if I wasn't a Catholic. So it could just be, yes, supporting their friends, but with what we have heard about the Church of Scientology wanting to always recruit celebrities and big heavy hitter names, to then go 2 years in a row, to me, it feels like maybe there was a little bit more interest or participation there.
I think this is a pretty good point. Like, in the context of Christmas and Christianity, for example, I personally don't think it's weird if you go to some kind of Christian event, even if you're a non-believer. Like, if you're invited by friends or family and you just feel like you need to go to support them. Because during Christmas time, themes of religion are everywhere. Like, if you go out and look at Christmas lights, you're gonna see a lot of nativity scenes. However, with Scientology, I think it's different because you can't really be like a casual Scientologist. With Christianity, there are different sects that vary in their cultiness, but most Christians, I think, in America have kind of adopted the label as a Christian kind of casually, but like with Scientology, you can't do that. If you ask anyone if Scientology is a cult, I would be willing to bet that a vast majority of people would say yes. Like, there's not sects of Scientology that are more culty than others. It's just one huge organization. And they have like the Sea Org and stuff, which is basically the cult within the cult. And those are the people who sign the billion-year contracts. You've heard of them, I'm sure. They remain trapped under the sturdy iron fist of the organization. But whether you're in the Sea Org or you're just a regular Scientologist, they have control over you and your life. And if you leave, they will fair game you and make your life outside of Scientology a living hell. So most people just don't leave because it's just too inconvenient. It's fair to say that this event that Ashton and Mila and the others went to, it was just Scientology's attempt to recruit them, as they often do with Hollywood elites, but they also could have been more involved than we know. Mila comes from an openly Jewish background, and Ashton was raised in a conservative Catholic family, but Ashton also said at one point that he had an open mind to learning about Scientology, so it's all up to speculation, but it's suspicious. So anyway, these letters. I'm gonna read Ashton's letter in full because there's just so much hypocrisy and bullshit. But you have to remember while I'm reading this that these letters that Ashton and Mila wrote were written after the court had already found Danny Masterson guilty of drugging and raping 2 out of the 3 women in this case. The victim impact statements had already been made. The trial had already been conducted. Danny Masterson was already found guilty, and they still had the nerve to beg the judge for leniency. Honorable Judge Almeida, my name is Ashton Kutcher. I am an actor, investor, philanthropist, and most importantly, a father. I met Danny Masterson when I was 20 years old in 1998. He instantly became a friend, dedicated coworker, and role model to me, and has remained as such for 25 years. If you're putting the pieces together, now you're probably understanding why Chrissy Bexler referred to Danny as Ashton's role model in the Instagram stories she directed towards him. As a friend, Danny has been nothing but a positive influence on me. He's an extraordinarily honest and intentional human being. Over 25-year relationship, I don't ever recall him lying to me. How would you know that he's never lied to you unless you caught him? Like, you know that people can tell lies without getting caught, right? He's taught me about being direct and confronting issues in life and relationships head on, resolving them, and moving forward. I know I'm interrupting a lot, but oh my god. Can we talk about how Ashton says that Danny taught him how to confront issues head on and resolving them? Meanwhile, he allegedly stumbled across his girlfriend's murdered bloody pulp of a body, and instead of calling 911 like any normal, decent person would, he calls freaking Danny Masterson and like his manager, and then he fled the scene and was like, I'll just let it be someone else's problem. That's not confronting an issue head on. And by the way, that's a pretty damn big issue. That's fleeing, that's running, that's selfishness, that's dishonesty. The LAPD confirmed that Ashton Kutcher was lying about all this, and that he decided to do that at the advice of Danny. I would hardly call that a positive influence. A true friend would tell you to do the right thing and report the scene to the police. If by positive influence you mean that he was a positive influence on your career and your wealth, then fine, I'll give you that one. But I would also argue that that's an extremely negative influence to have on one's character and like morals and stuff. And sure, Danny was definitely there when you needed him. You found a murder victim, and he was there for you while you sat outside of her house for an hour, trying to figure out what to do to save your career. That's for sure. Danny is a person that is consistently there for you when you need him. We've traveled around the world together, raised our daughters together, and shared countless family moments. Not only is he a good friend to me, I've witnessed him be a good friend to others and the kind of brother others would be lucky to have. As a role model, Danny has consistently been an excellent one. I attribute not falling into the typical Hollywood life of drugs directly to Danny. Anytime that we were to meet someone or interact with someone who was on drugs or did drugs, he made it clear that that wouldn't be a good person to be friends with. And for me, that was an implication that if I were to do drugs, he wouldn't want to be friends with me, which is something I would never want to risk or jeopardize. I am grateful to him for that positive peer pressure. While sure, Ashton probably never did drugs, but Ashton has a pretty well documented history of being somewhat of a party animal, and in my personal opinion, alcohol is more dangerous and all around worse and more harmful than many substances that people call drugs. That's just my opinion, but I hate this narrative that's just like, ooh, look at me, I'm so good, I've never done drugs. But meanwhile, they go out and get blackout drunk at a party every Saturday night, you know? To me, that's hypocritical. I'm not saying that that's what Ashton Kutcher was doing every single weekend, but he has definitely been to his fair share of parties. Not only that, but while Danny Masterson was not, to my knowledge, accused of actually doing the drugs, he was accused and found guilty of drugging his victims when their rapes took place. But as long as Danny wasn't actually doing the drugs, right, then it's totally fine. Jiminy Christmas. And then, according to Demi, he is the one who encouraged her to break her 20 years of sobriety. What a goddamn hypocrite. Shut the fuck up, Ashton. God damn. He also set an extraordinary standard around how you treat other people. There was an incident where we were at a pizza parlor and a belligerent man entered who was berating his girlfriend. We had never met or seen these people before, but Danny was the first person to jump to the defense of this girl. It was an incident he didn't have to get involved in, but proactively chose to because the way this man was behaving was not right. He has always treated people with decency, equality, and generosity. After 9/11, Danny was a huge advocate for support of the firefighters affected by the event. He wrote "affected," not affect. Oh my god, Ashton. Rallying his friends and co-workers to pitch in however they could. I like how he had to throw 9/11 in there. Anytime you want to pull on some heartstrings, just mention 9/11.
9/11.
Danny had his daughter a year before I had mine. He set a standard of being a hands-on dad. We have spent countless hours together with our kids, and he is among few people that I would trust to be alone with my son and daughter. He's also a dedicated and loyal husband with unwavering commitment to his wife. We have spent hundreds of hours working together. Danny takes his job seriously. He is kind, courteous, and hardworking. He treated everyone from the grips to the teamsters to the actors to the caterers as equal. I'm sure he did treat the crew members on set with respect and decency. It's funny how abusers can be totally different people to the public, but behind closed doors, they're absolute monsters. He showed up on time all the time and always pulled his weight. We have also traveled around the world together promoting our work. I can honestly say that no matter where we were or who we were with, I never saw my friend be anything other than the guy I have described. While I'm aware that the judgment has been cast as guilty on 2 counts of rape by force and the victims have a great desire for justice, I hope that my testament to his character is taken into consideration in sentencing. I do not believe he is an ongoing harm to society, and having his daughter raised without a present father would a tertiary injustice in and of itself. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Best. Since this is a video about Ashton, I'm not going to read the entirety of Mila's letter to the judge, but the relevant parts are: she also mentions how he refuses to use drugs, but most notably she says that he was an exceptional older brother figure to her, which...
She was as hot as she was, you know, come on, this one. 14, she was even hotter. But I'm not allowed to say that.
Okay, Mila. So it's pretty obvious that both Ashton and Mila thought that no one would ever see these letters except for the judge. What a naive thing to think. With their spotlight still shining so brightly, for them to suspect that something submitted to a court, which those involved in the case are entitled to see, and not only that, if they're filed with the rest of every other court document ever, unless it's classified or something, which normally these things are not, it's public record. Like, you can literally go on Justia, I don't know how to say it exactly, but that website, like, you can download literally any court record for like 10 cents a page or something like that. So it's shocking to me that they didn't think that something like this could happen to them. And Ashton testified in a national mainstream murder trial. So I don't understand how he didn't think this could happen. Unsurprisingly, as soon as the public saw these letters, Ashton and Mila fell under intense scrutiny. Because how could anyone in good conscience support Danny Masterson, who at this point had already been found guilty for the horrific crimes that he was accused of? The audacity of them to ask for leniency for Danny Masterson after he had already been found by a court of law to violate 2 women. And then there are other accusations by other women as well. You're gonna say that he's not a danger to society? I think that most of us would disagree with that pretty hard. The victims have said that they believe that justice has finally been served against Danny Masterson. So for them to think they're gonna minimize that justice just because he's their friend, it's just so ignorant and selfish. So, given all of the criticism, Ashton and Mila released what many are calling the worst apology video that doesn't involve a ukulele of all time. And that's for good reason. It's obviously scripted, unnatural, and terribly insincere. Let's watch.
We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or...
Shut up, Meg.
So when Ashton says they were intended for the judge to read, I think he means we didn't think any of you guys would ever see these. We thought we could be slimy behind closed doors and no one would ever know. You can really only behave this way for so long until your actions are realized by people that you don't keep inside of your tight inner circle. It's kind of an unmaintainable way of life.
Now, one thing that the internet has speculated on is why Ashton and Mila agreed to get involved to write these letters in the first place, and whether or not the Church of Scientology is involved. As I mentioned earlier, Scientology is a cult, plain and simple. They keep very close eyes on their members, and they get deep into their past through a process called auditing. It's almost like a therapy session, except the auditors are taking careful notes and looking for problematic things you've done in your past. They say they do this to clear you so you can restore beingness and ability, in their words. They say they're gonna guide you through your past so they can rid you of negative influences, but really they use this to gather blackmail against you, which they will use it against you when you try to leave or speak out against the organization. While Ashton, and by extension Mila, have never been confirmed Scientologists, they've obviously been closely involved with people who are Scientologists, and they've been involved in their events. With how close Danny was to Ashton, they most likely have dirt on him. The rumor is that Ashton and Mila agreed to write these letters to appease the Church of Scientology so that they wouldn't retaliate against Ashton specifically. Just a rumor, but I think it's worth considering in my opinion.
Anyway, remember Thorn, the nonprofit that Demi and Ashton started up together? Well, up until all of this happened, Ashton was still the chairman of the board of Thorn. I'm not sure what Demi's role is, but I think she's still involved as far as I can understand. Mila Kunis was an observer on the board, whatever that means. But once this controversy took place, after over a decade of running Thorn, Ashton and Mila stepped down from their positions. This was because the backlash the two received for their letters of support towards Danny Masterson was so severe that it was likely to damage the reputation of Thorn as a whole. You can't be the chairman of the board of an organization whose mission is solely to fight sexual abuse towards children, but also at the same time try to discredit the victims of a horrible sexual crime against them. You cannot support a convicted rapist while also speaking out against sexual abuse. The two just simply do not mix. It was clearly a hypocritical partnership at that point. In his statement, Ashton wrote, "Victims of sexual abuse have been historically silenced, and the character statement I submitted is yet another painful instance of questioning victims who are brave enough to share their experiences. After my wife and I spent several days of listening, personal reflection, learning, and conversations with survivors and the employees and leadership at Thorn, I have determined the responsible thing for me to do is resign as chairman of the board, effectively immediately. I cannot allow my error in judgment to distract from our efforts and the children we serve. The mission must always be the priority, and I want to offer my heartfelt apology to all victims of sexual violence and everyone at Thorn who I hurt by what I did. And to the broader advocacy community, I am deeply sorry. I remain proud of what we've accomplished in the past decade and will continue to support Thorn's work. Thank you for your tireless advocacy and dedication to this cause." Which, yeah, this was definitely the right move. Thorn does important and impactful work, and it's best not to taint it with Ashton's bullshit. I mean, personally, after all we've unearthed about Ashton Kutcher so far, I think that Thorn, personally, was meant to be a distraction. Ashton knew that he was a shit guy. He admitted in interviews that he was an asshole.
I mean, I had a really good, 5 years where I was pretty sure that I was awesome. I'm pretty sure I thought I was pretty great.
Right. Do you think you pissed a lot of people off when you thought you were pretty great?
I think I was an asshole, and
right.
you know, the truth, I'm sure that I was an asshole, and I've had people retroactively tell me you were an asshole. Even it's funny, when Mila and I started dating, she was like, "You were an asshole," and I was like, "I probably was," and a real.
In what ways were you an asshole? Seriously.
I just think that you can't. When you have that kind of a run of success, it's hard to self-regulate, and you don't really have people telling you no. Generally, people end up bringing people around them when they're successful that just become yes men and tell you that you're great, and even when you're doing things that are not great, they tell you that they're great, and then you become a jerk.
And while Ashton has had some smaller controversies in the past regarding his support of people who have been accused of crimes that are
sexual in nature, like how he tweeted in defense of a Penn State baseball coach who was covering up the rape of a child, or how a guy brutally raped and abused his girlfriend wound up serving on the board of Thorne. This support of Danny Masterson was so mainstream that Ashton really had no other choice but to step down.
Quite frankly, him being so involved in the philanthropy, that's a hard word to say, philanthropy that Thorne does, got hypocritical really fast. And Ashton probably should have left the organization to less problematic people a long time ago. But now that he has nowhere to hide, now is when he decides that he's finally too problematic to keep up appearances. No, he's pretty much been exposed as a guy who doesn't give any singular sort of a shit about victims of sexual assault. And it somehow gets even worse for Ashton in the way that, according to Aaron Levin-Smith of Growing Up in Scientology on YouTube, Ashton Kutcher has stated that he actually hates the Jane Does who spoke out against Danny Masterson. I only found out about this part from Aaron's YouTube channel. He says he's regularly in contact with the 3 Jane Does. I didn't see this reported anywhere else, so take this for what you will. Just know that at this point, it's still considered anecdotal, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, it's interesting nonetheless. Here's what Aaron says.
After the days of that 70s show, once he had the show on Netflix called The Ranch, Danny was a part of that show. Once word came down from Netflix that Ashton was going to have to fire Danny from the show, that Danny was going to be fired from the show, it has been reported by someone who was present in the production meeting that week that Ashton's specific words were, "That crazy fucking bitch." Spoiler alert, he wasn't talking about Danny. He was talking about one of the Jane Does who had approached Netflix with some concerns about Danny Masterson's involvement in the ranch. I think the only thing Ashton has publicly said about this trial, about Danny and the charges, the only thing he said prior to the conviction was, "I hope my friend is found not guilty," or I think he actually misspoke and he said found innocent, as if that's a thing. And it wasn't clear to me when I read that statement the first time whether he was like, "I hope my friend didn't do this," or "I hope my friend gets away with it." To be fair, he probably meant, "I hope my friend didn't do this." But I can tell you this, he sure as hell didn't believe the women who he knew and who he knew were Scientologists and who he knew and understood that you don't just go as a Scientologist female accusing male Scientologists of this kind of thing. Not when you get treated like you've done something wrong. As a victim, you get treated like you've done something wrong. Scientologists don't go around randomly accusing people of this type of crime, other Scientologists of this type of crime, much less a famous one, much less someone who's in their friend. Like even the judge in the sentencing pointed out that at the time these women came forward to the Scientology authorities, they had no motive to lie. There was no revenge motive. There was no attack Scientology's enemies motive. There was no money motive. And Ashton's response was, "That crazy fucking bitch." Ashton, who's the crazy fucking bitch now? Ashton Kutcher hates the Jane Does in the Danny Masterson case. And this was brought to my attention by one of the Jane Does yesterday. And the explanation for why does he hate these women is that these women seeking justice against Danny Masterson has cost Ashton and Mila north of $40 million. And that has to do with the exclusive streaming rights of that 70s show, which was not picked up by Netflix, as every one of those cast members, including Danny Masterson, was very much counting on. Not only did the exclusive streaming rights not get picked up, which were supposed to be somewhere on the order of $28 million per cast member for the lifetime of whatever the deal was. But realize Ashton Kutcher was also executive producer on the Netflix show The Ranch, which also starred Danny Masterson. But not only was Ashton forced to fire Danny from that show, but that show was then canceled shortly thereafter. Why not just do what seems to be the easy thing to do and make a sincere, genuine apology? Stop apologizing to all victims everywhere and apologize to the women who were specifically hurt by the letter that you wrote. The answer is Ashton Kutcher absolutely hates these women. They've cost him a fortune, him and his wife. And he has been actively trying to shut them up and stymie the investigation and keep information siloed away from the people who should have it for years and years. And I think he hates them so much, he can't bring himself to do them the honor of saying their names. That's what I believe to be true at this point. That's where I'm at on it.
And also, it's been alleged by someone who worked on the set of the ranch that when they wrote Danny Masterson's character off and filmed a funeral scene for him, Ashton broke out into tears.
Ashton Kutcher, the guy who ran a non-profit organization for over a decade that fights against sexual abuse and human trafficking, mainly against children, is allegedly more concerned about losing money and having to write his friend out of a show than he is about the people that particular friend has victimized. He only cares about certain victims when it serves him. But if those victims come in between him and his money, suddenly they're just crazy bitches? I mean, it's honestly sickening. We're all about holding people accountable here on this YouTube channel. And I hope that this mountain of knowledge that we now all unfortunately carry about Ashton Kutcher will force him to finally, for the first time in his adult life, be held responsible. I hope that he's held accountable, and I hope that if there's people who know things about this guy out there, that they also speak up. Not to dogpile on him or anything, but if he cares so much about the truth, he needs to hold his own personal truth to that same standard.
Anyway guys, this is where we're gonna end this video here. As just a quick reminder before I get into thanking my patrons and my members, for the month of December, for Christmas, I've decided that everyone who is in my postcard tier on either my YouTube memberships or my Patreon, as long as you are in the United States or one of the US territories, I will be sending you one of my hand-painted rocks instead of a postcard, just as a little Christmas gift. So if you're interested in getting a hand-painted, and even I can customize it for you if you email me and we can talk back and forth. If you want a rock from me, all you have to do is make sure that you are in the postcard tier of either my Patreon or my YouTube memberships. Now, if you're gonna join on YouTube memberships, just make sure that you send me an email with your address so I know where to send your rock, and then we can talk about if you want it customized and stuff there too. If you're on Patreon, usually I should have your address because when you sign up for Patreon, it usually goes there, and there's a messaging option there too, so we can talk about customization there. Just, yeah, make sure all of that is set up so I know where to send your rock. So as of the beginning of December, everyone who is in that postcard tier on either Patreon or YouTube memberships is going to receive a rock from me. Again, this just goes for everybody in the United States because shipping internationally is way too expensive. Now, I do have a few people in my postcard tier who are international people, and they've been on my YouTube memberships or Patreon for a while, so I'll be sending you guys rocks too, but just you guys, because you've been here for a long time. But everyone else, if you're new, just United States only, because I can't afford to send a bunch of rocks internationally. But okay, with that out of the way, I just want to thank all of the generous people who help make my YouTube channel possible. They are my financial supporters over on Patreon or my YouTube membership. The list of names that you're seeing up on the screen are people who get access to things like our private Discord server. Like I mentioned before, we do have a postcard club, and sometimes even more than that. So if any of that sounds good to you, you can go to patreon.com/Savannah Marie, or you can click the join button beneath this video to join my YouTube memberships. Just whatever platform you want to join on is fine by me. And with that, the biggest thank you in the whole wide world goes to Hula Chowdown, Jacqueline Nutton, Elizabeth Wyatt, Kessie Drew, KJ Barnes, Leanne, Caroline Reed, Charlotte Treese, Daniel Urena, Maddie Darley, Ray, Turd Ferguson, JJ, Martine Hubert, Amber Price, Baby Pink Pearl, Alice Wagner, Carol Campbell, Ari, Mira SIK, LaSalle Story, Mother Dragon 82, Fallon Lowry, Hannah, Carrie K, The Best Elephant, Jessica Billhart, Emion, and Auntie Lou, and to the rest of my financial supporters, thank you so much for being here and being you. And even if you're not a financial supporter, thank you for making it to the end of this video, because YouTube loves watch time. So you just being here helps my YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Keep making waves, babes. I'll smell you all later. Mommy Tsunami out.